This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
It's on. Excellent. Hello, I'm Eugene McFadden in the slot they've given me. And as ever, this is pretty much going to be amateur hour and a half, maybe. Today, I am talking to Katrina Lowry, aka Neuroteachers on Twitter. We'll be talking about who she is, why it's important to embrace neurodiversity in education, not ditching differentiation, therapy, and any other random topic that crosses our skulls,
This is
like
Teachers
Wednesday.
Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Is that it? I'm going to turn this bit off now. So yes, we're going to talk about. Katrina is actually logged in now. She should be able to ring in a second by pressing the co-host button or something, speaker button. I'm not quite sure. Hopefully she'll do that. We're going to talk about who she is, embracing neurodiversity in education, not ditching differentiation, which I thought was a really good blog post actually. Therapy, and the TV show Wednesday is currently really bugging me. So I think, is that TV series trying too hard? And I can't kind of figure out the nature of the rest of the world, like in that show. Do they know magic's real or not? Ooh, look, I'm going to press invite now. Send an invite to Katrina, who says connected. Hello, Katrina, can you hear us?
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, it's worked. Yay.
Yay, excellent. Always a bit like nervous with it's like, oh my God, it's going to work. Is it not going to work? Yeah. So, hello, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, Eugene.
That is okay. I really liked your blog on differentiation.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's okay. That's fine. It was really, really good, and it really made me think about things, because I know differentiation. You can't see me doing air quotes right now, but differentiation has become a really dirty word in the last, 2 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I can see reasons why that's happened. Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes we kind of say scaffolding now, and
yes,
that's just different. It's basically, we're giving them different support strategies, but we can't call it differentiation. But anyway.
I have a bit of a problem with that, to be honest, insofar as I can't remember whether it's that blog or no, it's a different one that I've said this in. So it's like a square is a type of rectangle, but a rectangle is not a type of square insofar as that. Thank you. I use it a lot for a lot of, it's one of my phrases. So you can have that. It's a good one.
I want to steal it. Thank you.
So scaffolding is a type of differentiation, but differentiation is not a type of scaffolding.
Oh, I like that.
Do you see what I mean? So I go to schools a lot, in my line of work. Shall I explain my line of work and then I can...
Oh, yes, please. Yeah.
I can do a lovely neurodivergent loop round of my tangent that goes off on another tangent, if you like.
That's pretty much what happens on this show. So go for it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Well, so I'm Katrina Lowry. I'm a neurodivergent teacher. I have a diagnosis of bipolar condition and also dyslexia. I have it on great authority from Judy Singer herself that actually things like bipolar condition are forms of neurodivergent condition. So if Judy Singer says it, because she invented the term neurodivergent, then it must be true. So, so I had quite an interesting journey through school myself. It was the 80s and 90s. It was a crazy time.
It was crazy.
Yeah, and it wasn't great to be. I mean, I was diagnosed with dyslexia at the time, so I was stuck in one of those terrapin buildings down the bottom of the school field.
That down there where no one could see you.
Yeah, do colouring in and cutting and sticking, that sort of thing. So but because I have really academic parents who got me tutors, I managed to get through and get a pretty decent education, some decent GCSEs and A-level, and go to university. And I decided to become a teacher, even though everyone thought that was a crazy thing for a dyslexic kid to do. But I did it. And I was actually a modern languages teacher I taught German and French.
That's pretty cool.
When I was mainstream, like initially that's what I was doing. And then because of the type of kids that I kept coming across, I meandered into special needs. It wasn't an active choice. It was more like, this is what I have to do kind of thing. It was just like, those were the kinds of kids that I tended to be quite good with. So I became a special needs teacher. I worked as a SEND teacher and then a Senko and then an advisory teacher. And I did that up until beginning of 2020. I left the advisory teacher service and I worked as a Senko part-time a bit whilst I first set up neuro teachers. And the main reason I did that is because I'm really interested in helping kids who are like me, like other neurodivergent kids. And, like, especially when I was at the advisory teacher service, it was in Gloucestershire. And so it's a big rural county. And rural schools have no resources whatsoever because some of the schools I work with had like 25 kids in them, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm from a big city. I'm from Cardiff. And I'm not used to tiny, weeny little schools like that. And they had no resources, no training, nothing. Like I had never thought about rural deprivation at all until I started working in that county. And they had no access to training really. And they'd be, because it's the village, right? If there was a child, a Down syndrome child or autistic child or, a very complex child, they went to the local school and that was their local school. And they had no resources in order to help that child, but they were expected to kind of accommodate them.
Yeah.
And, I'm really hugely into the idea of inclusion and that children should be able to attend their local school ideally. That's perfect. But without the resources and without the training, the staff will very quickly de-skilled. And I honestly think it's about the training and the information, particularly the information that you have, more than actually the resources, because teachers are actually really skilled and so are TAs. They're amazing, right? And I've seen some amazing practice in tiny little rural schools, like amazing stuff going on. But it's very easy to become completely de-skilled by the situation because you don't have the information. So that's why I set up neuro teachers, because I want to be able to offer training from a neurodivergent person about neurodiversity and say, hey, look, listen, this doesn't have to be really complicated stuff where you have to buy loads of things. You have to buy a massive scheme of stuff, or you don't need like loads of sensory equipment or anything like that. You can just do this with what you've got around you and with your own skills as a teacher. And what I want you to do is to just do what you're already doing mindfully with your neurodivergent learners in mind. And so that's kind of like why I wrote that blog that I sent you, is because, in there, the differentiation that I'm talking about, it's really simple things that you can do just as part of your normal planning.
Yeah.
Because I talk about it in the blog. So, like one differentiation, when you when someone observes you, and they say we couldn't see the differentiation.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing. That's like, it's so, it's just what I do naturally. It's good quality first teaching.
Exactly. You've done a good job then if they can't see it. But, I've had feedback like that as a SEN teacher,
Yeah.
We couldn't see your differentiation, Katrina. Well, that's because I'm doing it well.
Yeah, because we're like differentiation, we're like a ninja. It's like you can't be seen.
Yeah, exactly. And the kids don't want to stick out, do they?
No, of course not. God, that's like absolute social suicide.
Yeah, of course. Especially in a big secondary school, you don't want to be standing out, do you? And the same thing as well with your TAs as well. Your TAs should be like, in and out there, out of the whole thing.
Everyone, like helicoptering around.
Exactly, and they shouldn't just be with that child, the named child. They need to help the whole class. And there's a lot of time when actually it needs to swap round. So the specialist in that subject, or the specialist, in that age group, needs to be with those children, or else the TA is helping the rest of the class.
Yeah, totally.
And if you've got a good working relationship with that other professional, and they are professionals, in the room, then this should be like spinning plates. right? It should be seamless. So anyone who comes in there, they shouldn't be able to go like, oh, so those are the SEND children over there.
No, I think you mentioned the blog, one of my most like irritated things about when I look at, I've been to a few primary schools, and you've got like, and I kid you not, there was one school where you had the lion table, and then you had the cougar table, and then you had like, like I don't know, like the antelopes, something like that, something ridiculous like the prey, and you can guess what was on that table, and it's like, oh my god, and those poor kids are just stuck there, and it's like, for every single lesson in this primary school, you were there, and I'm like, those kids need to be on that table for every lesson.
Yeah, and I can't. I can't understand how those children are definitely at the same level for absolutely every single subject. Because any kid I've ever worked with, any kind of need, including myself, right? Because I include, because I'm a special needs kid. I was in that Terrapin building down the end of the playground where it was freezing cold, doing sticking and cutting when everyone else was doing algebra.
Yeah,
I was that kid, right? And those kids know who they are, but also as well, I can't understand how everybody has a spiky profile. Every single human being in humanity has a spiky profile.
Yeah.
So how is it that there isn't something that they can be on whatever, what did you say, like Gazelle's table or
The gazelles? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just,
How can they? Why isn't there something that they can be? Because maybe they're an amazing artist, or they're fantastic at music, or they're just really, really into the topic that you're doing that particular time.
Yeah, and then and you talk to some teachers and like, oh, but we've called them this name because then it's not obvious.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, it's so obvious.
They know in seconds.
Yeah, and the kids, oh, you're on a triangle table. Kids know. Kids,
And it's the same sort of thing as well, like you see particularly in well-meaning secondary schools. You'll see, they get 3 different tasks and say, you're a triangle, you're a square, and you're a rectangle. And everyone can see that they're, the level of task that they're at.
Yeah.
And if you say somebody's a triangle, why can't they try being a square or, a circle or whatever it was that I just said?
Yeah. Square, triangle, antelope, lion. Yeah. God, there's so much to unpick. I mean, I can see why Ofsted wanted to move away from differentiation for that reason. Because when it's done badly, but I think it's a case of baby in bathwater and the bath, and so we've got to press. I'm going to press the news button now because that's when what happens now. So that gives us a few minutes to grab a cup of tea or whatever, and then we can return to discussing. We could actually just kind of go through every terrible differentiation thing we've ever seen ever.
Yes, all right.
That would be quite funny. It's tragic. I've got so many things I've seen done badly down for the years. But oh God, well, this will hopefully be funny. And then we can talk about, do you want to talk about, because obviously I myself, I've been in therapy like twice, which has been quite interesting for me. And it kind of has led me to where I am now because of that as well. But I will, because I think it's important that we kind of normalize that sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I like, that was my comment on Twitter is like, at the moment, there's a lot of stuff about therapy in the press for various reasons about somebody famous who might have written a book. And, it is maybe the woman I am today. I'm completely proud. And so I'm really happy to talk about that. Yeah. And I think, hopefully, you and I talking like this will be one step towards normalizing it a little bit more.
Yeah, totally. Right, let me press this play button.
This show is brought to you in
there we go. And we'll be back in about 7 to 8 minutes.
Okay, brilliant.
Directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out. Visit johncatbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
With the majority of pupils returning to schools this week, the new year has brought new announcements and new challenges for many in the education sector. Government advice about illness and staying away from education settings if you're sick was shared, and the issue of strikes remains a hot topic. Pressures on school leaders continue, with The Guardian reporting that many head teachers are broken, at risk of heart attacks and exhausted as a result of the erosion of services for children and families, meaning the burden of support is falling on the shoulders of schools too often. So, as the new year begins on a duller note than any of us might like, here are the top stories that have caught the eye of Teachers Talk Radio News this week. In Manchester, the Morning Star reports that students at one of the city's universities have launched a rent strike. Students at the University of Manchester are using the strike to press their demands for an end to what they describe as extortionate rents and their requests for a 30% cash rebate. Organisers say that more than 30 students per day are joining the protest, spurred by the combined effects of the cost of living crisis and poor quality accommodation provided at too high a cost. According to the National Union of Students, half of England's students are facing financial difficulty, with 3/4 of these saying they expect this to have an impact on their studies. A previous rent strike in Manchester in 2021 was successful, and students hope to replicate this outcome in this new wave of action. FE Week reports on Ofqual's decision to disband its committee of experts who advise on exam standards in favour of a more flexible approach on policy advice. The Standards Advisory Group has been active for more than a decade and was set up to help the exam watchdog maintain standards. Ofqual confirmed that the committee will be replaced to reflect a broader remit, such as expansions in vocational and technical qualifications and apprenticeships. Ofqual has faced criticism and upheaval over decisions and communication during the pandemic. Deputy Chief Regulator Michael Hanton described the change as positive and will secure quality and fairness for all those who take and use qualifications. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who recently announced his ambition to have all young people study maths to the age of 18, has faced a barrage of criticism about his plan. The newspaper reports that Robin Walker, chair of the Commons Education Select Committee, feels that the PM should be focusing more on the early years sector to boost education levels instead. He calls the maths plan highly challenging, citing the nationwide shortage of subject specialists as the biggest barrier. Mr Walker, Conservative MP for Worcester and a former Education Minister, highlighted issues around recruitment and retention, as people with maths qualifications are quite employable elsewhere. So it is a highly competitive market when it comes to drawing people into teaching. He added that focus on the early years sector would be the most effective way of supporting children, describing it as embarrassing that England's childcare system is rated so poorly when compared to other countries. The eye also carries news of the decision by Catherine Birbalsingh to step down from her role as social mobility czar. Ms Birbalsingh, once dubbed Britain's strictest head teacher, has made the surprise announcement because she believes she comes with too much baggage, going on to say that her propensity to voice opinions that are considered controversial puts the Commission in jeopardy. Ms Birbalsingh wrote of her decision in a column in Schools Week. A controversial figure for many, but with an equally vociferous fan base, Ms Birbalsingh also commented that she felt the role of social mobility czar meant that she was becoming a politician, but that this was not a skill set she wished to develop. Finally, ITV News reports on how parts of a Turkish Airlines plane have been delivered to a school in Alveston, South Gloucestershire, to be turned into a new library. The project, named Flying High by pupils, will see parts of the plane turned into a new outdoor reading area. Full details can be found on the ITV website, with artist impressions of the final project showing children and adults enjoying the new space. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello! Did you know I've been doing this show for a year now? Well, if you didn't, now you do. So shower me in gifts and love. I'm kidding. But there is one person or group of people I want you to think about as this term draws to a close. Your tech support. They may, in your mind, be the people that say no to a lot of stuff. They may stop pupils playing games and stop a lot of the web getting into your classroom. But they keep you, your data, and your network safe. This week, as some of us are off, and others are desperate to be, roll on Wednesday, spare a thought for your techie. They'll be coming in over the break to patch and update. They'll be taking those broken machines and making them work again. These people, who in most schools are like ghosts. If Charles Dickens had had the privilege of tech support, they'd have been the spirits of modern-day make-do and mend. They wouldn't be draped in chains and padlocks, but come bearing an endless acceptable use policy. As you wind down, or if you have already, a thank you to your tech support will make your new year that little bit easier. Remember, next time you use tech in your lessons, everything is working because of them. As always, I'd love to hear what you want to know about tech. Let us know at TTR 2022. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech. Have a lovely break.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Oh, and we're
Hello.
back. I think we're
Yes,
back.
I think I'm
Hello, there we go.
here, aren't I? Good.
Yeah.
That's all right then.
You were here. Yep, that is fine. You were here. So I just spent that time obviously listening to the news that I just hadn't paid attention to for the last few days because I've been at work. Not that I ever really listen to the news anyway. And thinking about nightmare differentiation scenarios, of which there have been many down through the years.
Yeah, there have really been some
I mean-
really, yeah. I mean, you know, I see a lot because I go to probably about 3 or 4 schools a week, and
Oh,
you know,
wow.
and I was an advisory teacher, and I think I had 55 schools when I was an advisory teacher for 5 years, and you know, and then I also had nurseries as well, so I saw the
whole
full
range.
the full range of stuff. And like I said, I've seen some amazing practice, some absolutely phenomenal practice, and then some people who have got no idea at all. And I sort of think it's not really their fault.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with student teachers. I've worked with teachers who maybe lost their way, and you know, I've rarely found someone who didn't want to teach well.
Yeah.
But sometimes they haven't got the skills, and sometimes they don't know they haven't got the skills,
No,
which
I
is,
know.
and that can be quite awkward sometimes. But you know, so I've talked about my experience of the antelopes versus lions tables. What is your worst differentiation that you've seen?
I think so. Obviously, I'm talking specifically about neurodivergent kids because those are the ones that I support. Okay, so you know, just in case people aren't entirely clear about that, neurodivergent people make up about 20% of the population. The most common types of neurodivergence that you're going to see in the classroom are autism, dyslexia, ADHD, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, and developmental language disorder, which is massively underrepresented, and pretty much no school does differentiation right for children with DLD.
Oh, I'm really glad you mentioned that, but I will. Let's do differentiation. I want to talk about, because that's my current bugbear. Because I think we get literacy is the most important thing. You get literacy right. And in fact, I was delivering training to staff like literally 2 days ago when I was talking about the impact of vocabulary and specific language delay and other such things. But that's a completely massive, huge tangent right there. But go on, differentiation.
Yeah. So, you know, the first thing is that we like our subjects. We like talking, right?
Yes.
As teachers. If you have a specialist subject, it's brilliant because you get to stand up and talk about it for 6 hours a day if you're a secondary school teacher or a peripatetic music teacher, for example, in a primary school. It's brilliant because you get to talk about what you love. Yay. But the thing is, the children don't really know anything about what you're talking about. That's the point. That's why you're teaching them.
Yeah.
And the children will have varying rates of joint attention and varying rates of being able to absorb what you're saying. So, I mean, people say concentration, but they don't actually mean concentration because these kids will have amazing concentration on balancing the pencil on the end of their nose or, you know, thinking about the football match that they're going to play after school. They're concentrating brilliantly on what they want to concentrate on. They're not concentrating on what you want them to concentrate on. So when people say he doesn't concentrate, they mean he's not giving me joint attention.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point.
So I think the first thing that you need to do is make sure that all of the children are giving you joint attention. And not that clap, 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 clap thing that you get. But I mean, actually are they tuned into what you're saying?
Mm.
And the thing is, they might be balancing a pencil on the end of their nose and they can absolutely recite everything you're saying and make salient points about it. So the fact that they're balancing a pencil on the end of your nose isn't actually distracting them from the learning. It might distract the kid next to them, which is a problem, but it's not necessarily distracting them. So the first thing is that people mistake, I don't know, where do you stand on things like, stand on slant? Where do you stand on things like slant, Eugene?
I am, bearing in mind, people often comment upon it. I was in a meeting with a parent yesterday, and at one point I was like actually crouching on the table, not on the table, on the chair next to the table.
Right.
I say it now looking back, no one said anything. Everyone in my team or on my team has given up expecting me to stay still in meetings or sit properly.
I can't
I
either.
think, and I think there's almost fetishization, which I think we've got from some American schools, a fetishization about what attention, quote marks again that you can't see, looks like or should look like.
Yeah.
Because I myself can look like I am on a different planet, balanced on a chair, and you've got as much of my attention I can give you at that point in time, and I can probably tell you exactly what you just said as well.
Exactly. I'm currently balancing on one foot, if that helps, because I like a bit of proprioception myself.
Oh, I am. The tired I get, the more I seek that out.
Yeah.
So I occasionally have meetings in my office. I've got a stand-up desk for obvious reasons.
Me too.
And if it's such a game changer.
Oh my God. I have a treadmill under my desk as well.
Oh, I really thought about getting that, but then it's like no one's going to pay for that. But
no, well, I mean it's different because I'm self-employed. If you see
what
I mean, so it's a different it's a different matter. But you can get them very specifically. Like if you wait until about mid-February, there's going to be a load of them that are on eBay, nice and cheap.
That's a good point. I will try and do that.
Just saying.
I
have a standing desk. I have a treadmill under my desk. I have like 3 or 4 different places I can sit. I've got a yoga mat. I've got like a bolster. So I'm having I had a meeting yesterday, and there was 2 people. The other 2 people who were there one was ADHD and one was ADHD autistic. I'm dyslexic and bipolar, right? And at one point, I actually found myself apologising to them for the fact I was stimming, and they went, "Don't worry about it." I was like, "Oh yeah, cool. I could just because we're all neurodivergent, so we all get it." But I totally agree. There's this fetishization. I think is a good way of saying it. Of he's giving me eye contact. He must be concentrating really well. No.
Yeah, I've never expected eye contact.
No, eye contact is completely overrated. And even that whole thing about the slant is tracking, isn't it? Tracking the adult around the room, etc.
I'm like, I'm very good at recognizing when kids aren't paying attention.
Yeah.
I'm very good at recognizing when kids are apparently paying attention, but they're not paying attention. And some kids are very good at apparently paying attention and being in a different world.
Yeah. Or fawning as well. They can be terrified.
Yes.
Like I went to observe a boy who was close to exclusion in a school in the south of England, and I was observing him, and it was a science lesson, but I couldn't help but notice there was this girl in the class. I say little, she was a secondary school age child, but she just, I was just really worried about her because I could see that she was totally fawning, and she looked absolutely terrified. And I even said to the TA who was in the room, I said, is she all right? She said, oh, she's not getting any of this. She's got a reading age of 6.
What's the point?
I know. I'm just like, okay, is anyone going to, I wasn't there for her.
Yeah, but
there was no differentiation really in that lesson at all, because this was a school where the head teacher had told them all to scaffold up. And anyway, needless to say, the report about said school was that really we needed to put in these are the simple things we need to put in. And if I was to relabel what I'd written in that report, it would basically say, do some simple differentiation and make sure that you understand that, because the rate of information that was coming out. Anyway, we talk about our specialist subjects.
Yes,
we love our specialist subjects. We talk enthusiastically and quickly about them, and we get really, really hyper excited and things. And that's great for neurotypical children and for those who are interested in your subject and neurodivergent, or who can process the information quickly. That's great. right? But for those who have any kind of processing difference at all, you talking in 19 to the dozen about exothermic and endothermic reactions, interesting as they are, is not helping anyone.
No.
So I think probably the number one thing is slow down and speak less. And no one likes hearing that, though.
I, as someone who normally speaks at an incredibly fast rate, have spent. I've had like actual speech therapy, but it's so teachers. It's for teachers. It's so important to stop every so often, give children a time to like think,
Yeah,
and then move on to the next thing. But yeah, no one. But I've got so much content. I've got to get through it. Yes,
yeah. Well, I'm sorry, but I could swear about that. Really, I mean, the content. Right, the content is. You can stand there and deliver every single lesson you like, and you can love it and high five yourself about how brilliant it was and how you got through all the content. But if no one in the class understands it,
have you taught it?
no, you haven't taught it, have you? You just stood and monologued.
Yeah. If a tree falls in the forest, if a tree falls in the forest, no one hears it. Or if a teacher's like taught a lesson and no one's learned it, have they taught a lesson?
No.
But you've taught content, great. Have they learned content? Meh.
No.
But yeah, I think sometimes content becomes one of those false idols in education.
Yeah, absolutely as well. And they just keep putting more stuff in the curriculum, don't they?
Yeah, which I don't mind a kind of like a rigorous curriculum.
No, neither do I. No.
But it's got rigorous curriculum that can be accessed by the majority, and not a certain subsect of a subsection of the majority. But that's a whole another tangent right there. But yeah, differentiation, as we were originally talking about. Your worst differentiation you've seen, you've talked about. So you're talking about a situation there, a girl reading age of 6, and the bad bit was they weren't differentiating for her.
There was no differentiation really in that whole class. It was a case of the teacher standing at the front talking very enthusiastically about science.
Which, fine.
And aforementioned child who was actually there to observe was still talking about what's happening in the geography lesson.
All right.
He was talking about the geography,
so
but it was in a science lesson.
Yeah. So that because he hadn't moved on from geography
He hadn't
lessons?
processed it. He hadn't processed what had been going on. Because again, it was very, very content heavy. And it was stuff about demographic information in India. So there's a lot there, you know?
Oh God, yeah, loads. I can't move past the fact they knew that child had a reading age of 6. They knew that.
Yeah.
So they knew that information.
Yeah.
What were they doing?
Nothing. She had nothing that I could see, that I could observe. I mean, I wasn't there for her, but during the entire lesson, I saw nothing there was no scaffolding. I couldn't see any reasonable adjustment being made for that child during that lesson, and it upset me. It upset me a lot. But then I wasn't being paid to do you know what I mean? Like, I'm contracted. The vast majority of the reasons why I go into school is because a child is either an anxious non-attender or they are close to exclusion. That's the main reason why I go, or I go to do training or coaching around a particular type of neurodiversity with a group of teachers or TAs or support staff. But the most of it is about exclusion prevention. And the reason that I have a job is because we're not doing the inclusion part right.
Yeah, I agree.
We shouldn't be getting to that point, because basically the conclusion that I came to is the reason that he's doing behaviours which show that he's fatigued, like he put his head down on the table and then got told off for putting his head down on the table because he wasn't sitting in the right way. The reason that he's continuously getting these problems is because the work is, there's too much stuff, there's too much information going on to the point where an hour later he's still trying to process what was going on in the lesson before.
But the fact you're still trying to process it indicates he wants to learn. He wants to do well.
Of course. Yeah, he does. He does want to. And this is the thing, like the vast majority of it, like, schools care. deeply about the kids. You go into education because you love the kids. You also love your subject or subjects or age group, but you really, really care passionately about the kids, right? And you know, much as it's just been the beginning of term, and like the beginning of term is always hard, you really do look forward to seeing them, you know?
Yeah.
And you wonder how they've been. So they're not, nobody's doing this deliberately. It's just that, you know, like I've been working in education for 23 years. Yeah. We've been banging on about differentiation, whatever you might call it, you know, adaptive teaching, scaffolding up, all that kind of stuff for the entire time. Right. But honestly, if we had proper universal provision, quality first teaching, it's all basically the same thing.
Yeah.
If we had that right and we stitched that through the entire curriculum, we wouldn't be getting exclusion. We wouldn't be getting the number of kids who are anxious non-attenders, because it's nearly in the hundreds of thousands now.
And that's a massive. I mean, that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
It
I mean,
is.
as someone who was an anxious non-attender as well, as a child, I get that.
Yeah, I was too. I was in year 6 and 7.
I was unfortunately I was in Key Stage 4 when it was really important to not be an anxious non-attender. I was anxiously not attending. Not that I knew that I was anxious.
Neither did I. No.
No, I just like, I don't want to go in because I feel ill. Yeah. I was like, my tummy feels funny. Oh, okay. Yeah. It's funny, isn't it?
It is, but then do you know what I mean? It's actually really good that you and I have gone into education because we get it. You know,
Yeah.
if you stared into the abyss, you know,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And it's the same sort of thing. My partner's a TA, he's a qualified teacher. He did his PGC last year. He's also dyslexic and he has CPTSD. He was an anxious non-attender in year 6 and 7, and then again in year 10 and 11. And actually, those are the kind of people that you really need to have in education because we understand how it is.
Yeah. I think representation really matters. I think we talk about it, but it's like you know, like if I'd have known when I was an anxious non-attender that there were people like me, teachers, well, if there are adults like me in the school, I would have maybe turned up more, or felt safe or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's, you know, you aim at what you can see. If you're not seeing people like you come out the other end of things and be successful, you're less likely to think that you can go through things and be successful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's like any other kind of protected characteristic.
Yeah. It's funny how we kind of spin off from differentiation and get it wrong. And I cannot believe that child had a 6-year-old reading age and won't do anything about that. I can't get past that. I mean, if you've got a 6-year-old reading age, like secondary school, yeah? So that means you would have stood still in your literacy development for what, 7 years, 8 years maybe?
Yeah.
So something is going on there. Did the primary school, I mean, so many questions. Did the primary school not notice? Did the parents not notice? I mean, I'm actually getting quite irritated by this.
Well, the thing is, okay, if you compare and contrast her with aforementioned male student who I was there to observe, right? He's an exploder, she's an imploder. She's female, he's male. She's seen as being agreeable. He's seen as being disagreeable. You know, they're both neurodivergent in different ways. Like she, you know, I don't know what her needs were. I don't know why, but I mean, she's clearly got there's some barrier to learning there that's caused her to not to progress. I would imagine it might have been, you know, it could be trauma. She could have missed loads of school. I don't know the reason.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going on the fact that I was given the information I was given by the teaching assistant, and you know, I did follow up with the Senko afterwards and say I was concerned. And she said, we share your concerns. There are matters in hand. And I just went, okay, I can't do any more than that because I'm commissioned to work with this other child. But if you compare and contrast, they're in the same class. Her situation is equally as worrying because if a child is fawning, which she quite clearly was, that's a fight, flight. Well, it's a freeze response. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is equally as worrying. We should be equally as worried by a freeze response as we are by a meltdown.
Well, it is a meltdown, but it's just
It's a
internal
meltdown,
one.
but it's an internal one. But you see, the thing is, that teacher who loves the kids in her class, she does love them, right? Probably didn't know that kid was fawning and didn't know that child was having a shutdown. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm extrapolating, but say, for example, if she didn't, right, she would have been devastated had she really realized what actually was going on, I'm sure. Right. But you don't go home and tell your other half or your housemate or, your nan or whoever it is that you live with, a child had a massive shutdown in my class today. But you do tell them if a child had a massive meltdown.
Mm.
Do you see what I mean? So he's exploding, she's imploding. They're both having the same problem. But the one who you see as the problem, the child who you get somebody, an expert in to look at, is the one who's the exploder.
Yeah. Which I think we do many things good in education in this country.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do loads of brilliant things.
But especially compared to, like, I don't know, America,
Mm-hmm.
or, but I think one of the things we get wrong is, and I think it's down to funding, is sometimes the factory model that we have is too much of a factory. You don't get the time to know the kids in a large school.
No, and I mean, and it is if you're a secondary school teacher and you teach something that's compulsory all the way up to GCSE, like, RE, I'm taking, not English or maths now, RE, right?
Yeah. You're going to have so many kids go through your door.
So many kids, right? You could end up like I used to teach PHSE as well as languages, and I had throughout the year, at some point I would have taught every single class in year 7 and 8.
Wow.
And I just had them for blocks. I was doing sex and relationships education, stuff like that, because no one else wanted to do it, and I actually quite liked teaching that. But so I would see every single class of year 7 and 8. But there was a school. There were 300 kids in each year.
Wow.
So that's 600.
Yeah, you're just not going to know them, are you?
It was a massive, massive school, like at 3,000 or so. Sorry, just in year 7 and 8, there was 600 kids altogether. So it was a massive school that had 3,000 kids in it. So I ended up teaching 2 whole year groups throughout the year. And you can't possibly get to know all of them. You can't possibly remember the names of all of those children, and you certainly can't know what makes them tick.
No.
But there are certain questions about, should we be having schools with 3,000 kids in them? Is that a good idea? Is that really in the best interest of the children?
I would argue no, for many reasons. And I've heard of, a mate of mine used to work in the biggest primary school in the country, and it was 1,400 kids. And you think, a primary school of 1,400 kids?
Good grief.
I know. I'm like, gee. Obviously, it was in London. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's realistic, really, is it?
Well, no, it isn't. I mean, I had a friend who was a classics teacher who used to always go on about the Romans. They did everything in centurions. So they'd have up to 150 troops in each section, and then you'd have a legionnaire for every 1,000. Right, so nothing got above 1,000.
Yeah.
Nothing got above 100 as far as the kind of middle management is concerned, and no leader had more than 1,000 people to deal with, because it wasn't thought that you could do that. They were pretty successful, the Romans, for about 4 centuries as well, weren't they?
They were, yeah. They were, a bit stabby at times.
Yeah, a bit stabby, but they did all right.
They did all right. They did really good roads.
That's true. Really good roads.
And they did good wars as well, apparently.
But I just think that there's something to be learned from that. Like, maybe things shouldn't be allowed to get that big, because you're going to lose the personal touch at some point, aren't you?
Yeah. And I think, the nature of, we are in a very high stakes game. And you need that personal touch. The kids need to know that you're there for them. And sometimes it does take one adult noticing and doing something. When you were over in your bungalow as a child, did you have an adult who noticed you?
Not until like, so, they put me in that Terrapin building with Mrs. Solly, who is lovely. Don't get me wrong, she was a nice person, right? But it's now what I understand to have been patronised. I didn't know what patronised meant when I was like 9 and 10. And then really the reason that I got out of the Terrapin, because I got good enough to leave, was because my parents got me a private tutor.
Mm.
And I had private tuition for maths and English and learned my times table and how to read, because I couldn't really read until I was about 11. And then my year 6 teacher was really good. Like I think, to be honest, she was probably the inspiration for me becoming a teacher, because she was also what I now know to be very relational. Like she really got to know us and she really understood that. And she also tried to make us think. She wasn't just teaching us to be compliant. She really genuinely wanted to make us think and hear our opinions, which is it's a good kind of age to do that in year 6 as well. And also we did like loads of fun stuff, because in them days you didn't have to do SATs or any of that rubbish.
Oh yeah, I also avoided SATs. I sat the year 9 SATs though. So I was that weird year where we sat the year 9 SATs, but I didn't sit the year 6 SATs.
Yeah, no, I guess. Right, so you're probably like about 3 years younger than me then, are you? I'm 47.
Yeah, I am 42.
Oh, well, there you go then. So
yeah.
So I couldn't really understand SATs when they were first introduced, and I can't really understand them now.
No. I mean, my kids would be fine at SATs. Well,
mine was. She really enjoyed them, actually.
I think, yeah. And some people do.
She really enjoyed them. She said it was the best thing about year 6.
Oh.
She's definitely neurotypical. I don't know how that happened.
Well, genes are wonderful things. I've got 3 daughters, of which one is a mini version of me. And we're on the process of getting her assessed. And the other 2 are very, normal, quote unquote, normal. But
you never know how the dice is going to roll, though, do you?
You don't know how the dice are going to roll. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. But yeah. So the worst example of differentiation you saw was there was no differentiation.
Yeah, I mean, the worst I've seen is nothing.
Yeah, right. And I think I can agree with that one. Yeah, I could talk about observe the lesson once, and there was like, and we always get back to there's 7 different worksheets, all color, basically the green, the light green sheets, the blue sheet. I was like, wow, it's like all the kids doing different things. I was like, and I said to the guy afterwards, I said, look, seriously, as a lesson, it was like about 10 years ago. Back in the days we graded things, I was like, you know what? Yeah, everyone learned something. I went around, behavior was good. And I was like, how long did it take you to plan that lesson? Bear in mind, 100-minute lesson. And he was like, oh yeah, about 60, 70 minutes. So, wow, that's quite a long time. That's quite a long time. Yeah. It's like, is it worth your time doing that? And he was like, and we had a long conversation. He was like, and I was like, you could have done this, you could have done that, you could have done, but there was that period in education where it was all about different kind of worksheets. We've had, education's had some interesting sacred cows.
Death by 1,000 worksheets, like I think that's honestly what most people who've been teaching over the last 10 years think differentiation is.
Yeah.
You're going to have to make loads of stuff, and it's going to take you ages.
Oh, it's nice. I'd rather, again, I was doing whole school training, because I think the most, maybe controversially not, I think the Senko in the school sort of a really tight, like finger on a pulse of good teaching and learning. Absolutely. And I think in a Senko sort of have like a lot of input into what good teaching and learning looks like in a school, because, we talk about, SEN kids or disadvantaged kids, the canary in a coal mine. Yeah. But if you get teaching and learning really good, you're going to kind of like, it's not about them, the bolted on kids, the SEN kids, because they're going to get included anyway, aren't they? Because the teachers know what they're doing to teach well. But yeah, my training part of it was like, think about time management. We're in the resource management game. If you're taking an hour to plan an hour-long lesson, something's going wrong here. And I think sometimes teachers need to hear the idea that actually what's most important is that you're fresh and in front of that class, and you are thinking on your feet, and you're making micro adaptations as you're teaching, rather than you got like 15 worksheets in a kazoo or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my soapbox.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I mean, it's basically like that's what my blog is about. Is like, here are some tips that you can do which don't really require you to do anything apart from one where I change the format. But then by changing the format, I would do that for maybe 1 or 2 children.
Yeah.
And if it was something like, so one of the ways I changed the format was something is we were doing Vikings, and I had a boy in my class whose special interest was caravans. So what I used to do is I used to like get really, really small pictures of caravans, like reduce them down to the smallest I possibly could and hide them in the text.
Oh, nice.
So he'd read the text and he'd go, and I'd say, I'd say, Derek, what was the answer to question 1? And he'd tell me the answer and he'd go, and also it was a 1962 Streamline. And he'd tell me the answer and then he'd tell me which caravan I'd hidden in there.
Oh, that is really nice. And again, that's relationships as well.
Exactly.
Like,
and also it's really easy to
Yeah.
do stuff like that. That's simple.
Yeah.
Because I was going to print the worksheet out for everybody else anyway. I just did one where I put some caravans in it.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a small thing that I really do rate your blog. So
Thank you.
that's okay. One of my projects, one of my many projects, because I'm a bit of a I've got a very good head teacher who, because my attention span sometimes is a bit like, I started a project, next project. It's like you haven't finished the last project. Yeah, fine, but I'm like that one of those memes. You know that meme of the man turning around at the other girl.
Oh yeah,
That's me. That's me with like all my other side projects. But yeah, so new head teacher, very good at going to me basically. Here are your train tracks, and every so often he go, no, you've come off your train tracks, back onto your train tracks now. Oh, fine. But yeah, one of my projects, one of my main projects is the idea of every faculty in our school has one teacher who works with me in a separate SEN like way. So we all meet on a regular basis, and we look at, and everyone's got like a mini research project around SEN, and they're developing basically it's what good teaching looks like, but we're calling it SEN. But how best to support SEN students in your class, and therefore everyone in their faculty, then everyone in science talks to, the science guy about it, and if he's a bit stuck, he'll come and talk to me about it. So it's
that's brilliant.
So thanks. That's the idea of like, I'm pretty sure I stole the idea from someone, but I can't remember. But I think for a while there, being a SEN comment, you were in charge of SEN, and everyone came to you with the problems. It's like, no, if we get teaching and learning right, we're going to get everything else right. So it's about developing teaching and learning basically at like a faculty level.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more with you. It's just like, it's what you do every day, not what you do on a Wednesday from 1 until 2 o'clock with
Exactly.
the TA.
Yeah. And and it's a work in progress, but I think it's really having it's really having an impact, and it's going places. Because I obviously got my kind of like my team of volunteers, and some of them have so impressed me and so surprised me with the sheer level of like passion and enthusiasm, and they're just going off and doing things I didn't even think about them doing. I was like, wow, that's actually amazing.
That's fantastic. Do you see what I mean, though? That is exactly what the kind, that's the whole kind of like relational thing as well with the staff, but also as well, it's like another thing that I say quite a lot is, I was an advisory teacher. Yeah. What I learned being an advisory teacher is that there's no vice like advice.
I like that.
Thank you. You can have that one as well.
I'm going to steal that one as well. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Have it for nothing. But I didn't invent it either. I heard it from someone else. But it's true. If you go in and tell people what to do, they feel disempowered. And this is the same for your kids. This is the same for your staff. This is the same for every human, right? You tell someone what to do, you feel disempowered. Yeah. If you give them information or ideas, then they feel massively, massively empowered, and you'll be astounded by what they can achieve. And that's exactly what you've done there. That's awesome. That should be a case study. Have you thought about writing that up?
Well, I am actually one of the things. Again, one of my side projects is I've joined the NASEN Whole School SEN review.
Oh.
So I'm doing that, and that's what I'm doing. There's basically, and you got to have you got to have a project, and I kept flip flopping between. Is my project going to be, everyone's leader of SEN, or is the project going to be the inclusive classroom? And I keep that's basically the title you got to have, and my project just kind of flip flops between the two different things.
Yeah.
Because I am making them leaders of SEN, but
Yeah.
we're definitely creating inclusive classrooms. So I'm going to write it up as a case study.
Oh, that'd be good. I look forward to reading that, actually.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
I think that's going to be really useful for a lot of people as well, because that's, again, like it's a low-tech solution, which doesn't really cost you anything other than time, empowers the staff, and it's going to have a massive improvement. And do you know what? I really wouldn't be surprised. I don't know how long you've been doing this for. Really wouldn't be surprised if that also improves results across the school.
Yeah, I think it will in the long term.
Yeah.
We've been doing this since about September. That's what we are now. Thank God, January. But yeah, we had Ofsted rocked up, and Ofsted were like, I was explaining it to Ofsted, and they were like, "Wow, they're like Trojan horses." And I was like, "Okay, I mean that's a bit
Okay. Sounds sinister.
sounds sinister, but yes, you're right, they are Trojan horses." But one of my things, getting back to, because we were talking about developmental language delay.
Yeah.
Ages ago we talked about that, but I was talking. So one of my big things is that kind of getting literacy right in the classroom level, and using we call them faculty champions, to develop what good literacy looks like in their classrooms. And like, if we get that disciplinary literacy, whatever the hell that is, if we get that right, because if you get literacy right, you're going to get most of SEN right. The end. And we can talk about if you can read the word, you feel better about yourself, and all those kind of things, and how much of SEMH is in fact just failure at school, and
Yeah.
all that stuff. Let alone the fact that I was harping on in my training with everyone. I kept saying the same thing, but basically, if you rocked up to your job and you failed for 6 months, you'd be off on stress leave. We've got some kids who've come to school every day and failed for 8 years. How are they feeling? And I think how much of our like school avoiders is linked to that. It's linked to like failure or thinking they're going to fail. But developmental language delay. Trying to address that. Do you want to talk about developmental language delay as that massive tangent cycle we've just done?
That's okay. It's good. It's good neurodivergent. But we did cycle back to it, though. We said we were going to circle back to it, and we did.
Yeah.
Metaphorical high five.
Yeah, boom. There's a few instances I'm going to cycle back now, and then we're off on a different tangent. That's just, I'm like, you can't see me right now, but I'm actually drawing like a kind of clover thing in the air around me right now.
I get it. I totally get that. But we did it though. So
we did it.
We're here. We reached a destination. So yeah, developmental language disorder, for those who don't know, is the most common. Well, one of the most common of the classroom neurodivergent conditions. Affects about 1 in 6 people. It's super, super common, and it's where there would ordinarily there's a delay in expressive language, so speech. There's a delay. So a delay would mean that the child wasn't really speaking in more than word. They might have some speech by the time they get to preschool, but they may just be using words or 2-word sentences. And sometimes their receptive language is really good. So they'll understand instructions. They'll be able to respond to you. So this is why like preschools don't necessarily, well, actually a lot of preschools are all over this now. It's got a lot better in the last kind of 3 or 4 years. I think because of lockdown, actually, because people are noticing it more. So that's a good thing. That was a good thing about lockdown, that people started to notice how different, how speech is massively affecting things. But again, back to our agreeable child in the classroom, the one who's having a shutdown. The similar sort of thing with kids who have developmental language disorder usually have relatively good passive skills, so they can understand what you're saying at a transactional level. So when they're wee small, you think that's fine because they understand you. And then they don't actually learn to speak in sentences before they get to school. And then bam, you're right into phonics.
Yeah.
And they haven't actually learnt to speak in sentences, and they don't have all their parts of speech yet. So reading doesn't make any sense particularly to them, because they can understand transactional language, but they can't really understand a story. And you can't produce writing until you've gone through all of the phases of language development.
Mm.
So, you know,
And
that's
writing is an incredibly, we forget as experts, we can write. We can forget how incredibly complex writing is as a
so
skill.
difficult. It's
It's-
such a
yeah.
difficult thing to do. The other thing is as well, what I came across the other day, which is this thing that I totally forgot, right? And this isn't about DLD, but this is about writing. If you look at the X-ray of a hand of a 4-year-old as compared to a hand of a 7-year-old, the bones aren't even like anywhere near developed in a 4-year-old. It's no wonder that they find it really difficult to write.
Yeah.
In other countries, we're not asking children to write until they're 6 or 7, when their hand is just much more developed.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
you know, I get parents often say to me, "Oh, he's 5 and he can't write his name." I'm like, well, probably his bones haven't developed yet enough for him to be able to write his name.
Yeah. And you got those outliers who you could do earlier because their bones develop earlier. There's so much like, and then it's like, then they become like, oh, you're really clever because you can write your name early. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Or
Exactly.
because your hand happened to develop a bit better.
Yeah, exactly. The same sort of thing with developmental language disorder as well. And like I live I'm back in the city now. I'm back in Cardiff. When I used to live in Stroud in Gloucestershire, I don't know whether you know anything about Stroud, but it's basically this big hippie town. It's lovely.
No, my geography is terrible. So
well, it's in Gloucestershire, and it's kind of hippie central, really. You know,
yeah,
it's like a festival, but no one went home because they already lived there, sort of thing.
yeah.
So a lot of the parents have a lot of ideas about, you know, not making people do things till they're ready and so on and so forth. So you would get a lot of these children who had really great passive skills, but couldn't actually produce speech sounds and were going to school. And they, you know, I want him to develop at his natural level and which is all well and good if we were all in the wild, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
If you're expecting kids to go into reception and they've got SAT-PIN to do in week 1.
Yep.
You know, it ain't happening really. They haven't even developed speech sounds, and suddenly you want them to do phonics.
It's just setting kids up to fail, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And so I think, you know, there needs to be more understanding really that developmental language disorder is a thing. It is related to things like dyslexia and dyspraxia and so on, because it is a neurodivergent condition. And also the two can co-occur. So, you know, a lot of kids who have DLD end up being dyslexic or dyspraxic as well. Well, they always were, but you know what I mean? They get diagnosed with that as well. So that's the thing then, you know, like if a child can't speak in sentences, then they are disadvantaged by the time they start reception. So there is a good chance that they're going to find reading and writing very, very difficult. And they were already behind, probably about 2 years behind. You know, and when are they going to catch that up if there's nothing in place?
Yeah, and you were talking 2 years behind when you're like 5 or 6.
Yeah,
that's like
a million years.
It's like a third of your life.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, and you see everyone else accelerating, and it's like, oh, they're good at this, I'm not. School isn't for me, and that's it. Yeah,
exactly. Like I've had, you know, a friend whose child had a similar kind of thing, and you know, he went for the first couple of weeks, and he went, "I've tried school now. I'm not going anymore. I've done it now.
It's done. Yeah, I'm over that.
Yeah,
over that. I don't blame him.
exactly.
You know, my daughter number 1 loves school. She's very sporty, very like academically able, probably, you know, sociable, everything else. Daughter number 3 loves school, academically able, very sporty, everything else. Daughter number 2, you know, my little clone. You know, we have battles in the morning some days, because you know she's very clever and incredibly like, you know, like she's hyper verbose. You know, like remember, like she was 2 years old talking to us about poison dart frogs.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you, Octonauts. That was Octonauts.
Yeah. Oh, I love Octonauts.
Octonauts was amazing. I actually love that. But like, she just come along and it was like, that's a poison dart frog. And it's like, are you 2 years old? What are you doing? But yeah, not a fan of school. You know, not a fan of her handwriting. You know, she struggles to write, struggles to spell. She can read really, really well. That doesn't particularly like the boys in her class who are loud and rambunctious, and that's very much not her bag. So, but you know, we will get there, one way or the other.
Oh, I'm sure you will, and she's got you to support her. And also as well, I think like if she is very like you, then you'll know, you
Yeah,
understand what it's like. And like you were saying earlier about representation.
yeah, she's my little clone. But then I went for a phase of both of us just kept winding one another up because we were so similar. We're like in a permanent feedback loop. But we've now, and actually thanks to actually this this radio show. Is it a radio show? Is it a podcast? Whatever you want to call it.
It's both.
It's both. It's a kind of merger. I was talking to someone called G, and she had a very similar situation, and she said you got to take a step back from your child. And I had a conversation with her on this radio podcast thing, and then literally the next day, I felt myself getting into like one of those feedback loops. I was like, nope, think, step back, be an adult, and it just totally changed my relationship with her, which is really nice, which is really good.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. So yeah, like this thing is like my talking therapy. There we go. Nice little
There you
merge
go.
into that
See,
one.
we went round again in that little bit of the clover or whatever it was you were drawing.
Yeah.
We went round into another little divot there.
Yeah. So I've been in
Divot, is that the
therapy.
technical word? I'm not sure.
I've just made it up now. It's just what we're going to call it now. Divot, club, what we're going to call it. Wrong turn. So yeah, I've been in therapy twice in my life. And I suspect probably my best therapist is actually probably my partner, who says things to me like, I think you're feeling this emotion now. I'm like, no, I'm not. Oh, wait. You're right, I am. Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah. So that's quite helpful for me.
Do you have a bit of alexithymia then?
Oh, yeah, totally. I rarely know what I'm feeling, which is daughter number 2, very similar. Yeah, I rarely know what I'm feeling. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I am feeling this emotion, but often enough, I don't notice. Like emotions happen in a different room in my head to me, as in fact does a lot of my sensory input. So I've like dislocated things or like cut my hand open and not really noticed or cared. And then be like, oh, wait, I'm feeling something. I'm in pain. Maybe I'm itchy. No, I'm bleeding. It's pain. Okay. But yeah, sometimes I confuse pain with being itchy.
So that's a bit of an interoception thing then.
Yeah. So yeah.
It's interesting how they're all linked up though, isn't it, with the interoceptive difference and the alexithymia.
Yeah.
I kind of also like those two things. I kind of wish I'd known about those at the beginning of my teaching career.
Oh yeah, me too, definitely.
And also as well, like I hate to confess this as having been an advisory teacher and also a Senko. I've written like probably not hyperbole at all, but hundreds and hundreds of EHCP applications in my life, and I have written as an outcome. Will learn to understand their own feelings, will learn to identify their own feelings in tons of GCSEs as an outcome. And I didn't realise I was being ableist because that was the thing that you wrote about autistic kids.
Yeah.
But I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. But I didn't. You see, the thing is, like earlier on, I've only really found out about that in the last 5 years. And it was whilst I was an advisory teacher, by which point I'd written, because advisory teachers, you have to write like 3 or 4 reports a week for an EHCP.
See, I mean, EHCPs in many ways irritate me because I think
they are really irritating.
I'm quite good and I'm batting quite well at getting them. I was talking to the Senko about that yesterday, and she was like, "You wrote how many last year, and you got how many through?" And I was like, "Is that a good number then?" And she's like, "But it turned out it was, mostly because I keep reading about how to like just cause problems at county. I recommend anyone listening do the IPSIA SEN and law course. a very helpful
Oh,
course.
yeah, that is really good.
Such
Yeah.
an amazing course for you to be able to say the counting. I think you'll find that in what we're looking at now is the Children and Families Act of 2014, and legally you cannot turn down an assessment because that's a really helpful phrase to have, and trot out. Anyway, that's
Yeah, I had it saved to my phone actually.
oh nice. I've got it saved on my desktop. It's just like gonna stick that here now in my email.
Mhm.
And like, I was talking to a parent yesterday in that meeting where I was like kind of hunched like a vulture on a chair. And we're talking about what's going to happen. Here's the game we're going to play. We're going to write the EHCP application. They're going to turn around and go, "Ooh, no!" But we're going to come back. It's just knowing how to play the game, and it shouldn't be this way. It should not be this way.
No,
This
it
is
shouldn't.
really unfair.
Hmm.
So that's not even talking about EHCPs have got loads of words in them sometimes,
Oh,
and you
God,
get them, and it's like, God, what's all these words mean? Why don't you just write down as you're meant to write down? Needs TA support 5 hours a week for this. Needs one-to-one time with a speech and language therapist 1 hour a week for this. Why don't you? They don't write that in it. They should write that in it. They don't. I mean, legally, they should write that in it. But and then things like learn to explore their emotions.
Yeah, I know, and I did write it loads of times, and then found out about alexithymia and the link with interoceptive sense, and realised that, and also spoke to my friend who's autistic, and I don't know why I hadn't thought to ask her really before that. She said, "Yeah, sometimes I don't know how I'm feeling until about 3 days after it's happened."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh God, yeah, you have said that to me before. Why haven't I made that link?"
But you don't if you're not in it, you don't realise it. And even me as a fairly switched on individual, sometimes I forget. So like we had like a big conference at our school on Tuesday, and like there's all these people, strangers from the outside, who were like in our like communal area, and I was like, I don't want to leave my office. There are all these people here I don't know in my space, and I was like, wait a second, am I feeling anxiety? What am I feeling? And I was like, I don't feel anxiety. I'm feeling dread. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I couldn't actually name the emotion I was feeling. But then I was like, this is what I used to feel like all the time as a child. This is what children with EBSA feel like, probably a fair bit. But yeah, so you forget because you're not living it.
No, but I mean, I should be a bit more like, I am neurodivergent myself, and I'm not autistic. I should anyway, I probably am being a bit mean to myself, but
You
know
probably
more,
are.
you do better. In the words of Maya Angelou, you know more, you do better.
And that's all you can do. And everyone knows more and does better every day, the world becomes a better place.
Exactly.
But I do think EHCPs have got too much ableist language in them.
Oh, way too much. Way too much.
And you see the entire, again, that's just a whole different, we could just motivate EHCPs for till the cows come home.
Well, I'll come back on if you want. We can do a moan about EHCPs.
That'd be really good. We could do motivate EHCPs, how to write EHCPs, and things to say to local authorities to make them give you EHCPs.
I think people would find that really useful, actually.
Yeah, possibly so. Well, we could do
Yeah, but I do that. I do the same dance. So at the moment, besides being employed by schools or local authorities or MATs or whatever, I get employed by parents quite a lot, and I'll say, if you're going to apply for an EHCP, this is the dance that we're going to have to do. So expect that it's going to get turned down, but you are going to appeal, and they might ask you to go to mediation, which means you have to go to the posh hotel on the industrial estate and drink the tiny bottles of water with the little pencils with the name on it, and the person has to listen to you, and they come down from London on the train, and the local authority pays for all that, and then they agree that they are going to actually assess, and they're going to do it every single time because that's what they do.
Yeah, and it's like, why the hell don't they just? Why?
Well, this is the thing as well, again, the figures have come out again, I think it was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
95% of appeals go in the parents' favour anyway.
Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous. And
so
it's just
what's the point of turning it down then?
Because it's the amount of parents who don't appeal.
Yeah, I know, because they're basically hoping that, you find a brick wall, then you'll just go away and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, it is again, it's a middle class thing, isn't it? You have to be a champion middle class letter writer if you have a SEND child.
Yeah. And that's so annoying. Let alone,
really annoying.
Yeah, we could talk about how dyslexia and being middle class. How much, that massive crossover there. How many working class kids who are dyslexic haven't got that diagnosis?
Well, this is the thing that, again, like I said, I was talking to about a very exciting project I can't tell you about yet, Eugene. I was
Ooh,
talking
okay.
to two other neurodivergent people in business yesterday, and we were again like saying, right, so I have a diagnosis which is my privilege.
Yes.
The fact that I'm diagnosed is because I'm privileged now, and I can literally tell you that it's a privilege because in the 80s, when I was 9, when I was diagnosed with dyslexia, my parents paid for that from an educational psychologist, which was pretty much unheard of at the time. Nobody did that, but my parents did. But my parents are psychiatrists, so they're pretty clued up, and they knew about these things, and they knew a bloke who could, who would do the assessment. So I am privileged to have a diagnosis on paper, right? But like you say, there's all of these kids, there's loads of kids who just aren't going to get a diagnosis, who aren't going to get recognized, who aren't even going to get, noticed as being anything other than disagreeable.
And I think, and one of the things, getting back to my 3 daughters, is I'm determined that they're going to be disagreeable.
Yes.
The world needs more disagreeable young ladies who aren't going to take
Absolutely.
crap from people.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing that my daughter is, I can definitely say I've done a good job in raising a disagreeable 12-year-old.
Yeah, and that's what we need in the world. We need more disagreeable people.
I'm fiercely proud of her. Sometimes she says some things to me and I've got no choice, Like when she was 3, one time when she was 3, she said, "Oh, Mummy, I want swimming lessons." And I said, "You're not old enough for swimming lessons yet. I can teach you." And she went, "But Mummy, you're not a proper swimming lessoner." She's right, I'm not. So she got the swimming lessons.
I think, I got my dad. My dad definitely raised me to be disagreeable, and he used to say to me things like, "You got to be your own man. You got to walk your own road." And the amount of times I kind of, in my teenage years, threw it back at him. I'm walking my own road. I'm being my own man.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, you are. Yeah." And I look back now and I'm like, "Yeah, that was good advice."
It is good advice. Yeah, you should be proud of that.
Yeah, no, it's good advice. I think it's actually quite a nice place to end it. Mostly because I've got a kid's birthday party to pick up the pieces from. But we could talk on for ages, actually, about all sorts of things. But I really appreciate you coming on.
That's all right. I'm happy to come back. Just let me know.
Please. Yeah, I mean, if you want to do next first Saturday of February, whatever that is, we could talk about EHCPs. Oh, we could do it. EHCPs, all the things we wish we knew.
Okay.
So let's do that. That might, I mean, randomly, I've got like the 2 most listened to Teacher Talk Radio podcasts last year. I don't know how that's possible.
Oh, did you? That's cool.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how. I think one of them was Peter Warmbury because he's like way more popular than me.
He's amazing. Like he's one of the people who's helping with the Neurodivergent Teachers Network. So.
Oh, is he? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what is a neurodivergent teacher? Oh, we went.
Oh, yeah. I never even mentioned it. Right. I'll just say really quickly.
Plug it.
Neurodivergent Teachers Network. We've just formed a CIC community interest company, and we are going to be hoping to do support neurodivergent teachers. So number 1, we want to do a massive survey to find out how many of this there are, what kind of neurodivergence they are, neurodivergent needs they have, and what support they need.
Are you on Twitter?
Yes.
Oh, what is your Twitter account?
It is NeuroTeachNet.
At
NeuroTeachNet.
NeuroTeach. Net.
And that actually, Pete runs that. He runs that page.
I have now followed you. Excellent.
Great. Yeah.
There
So we're going to do some research. We want to get into initial teacher training to talk to people about being more neuro-inclusive in the way teacher training is delivered to students.
Yeah.
We want to get in with employers like Matt's local authorities to talk to them about the advantages of employing neurodivergent teachers and TAs. And we also would want to ideally have a kind of like, not exactly a helpline, but like a chat option that you can get advice and information about.
Yes.
on the website. So we're quite ambitious. We're going to need to get some grants and things like that for the money to do that. But we've got quite a big network of about 500 people at the moment.
Oh,
And we're
yeah.
on Facebook as well. We're on Facebook, Neurodivergent Teachers Network on Facebook. And also we're on Instagram, at NeuroTeachNet on Instagram as well.
At NeuroTeachNet. There we go. Someone's actually asked for it in the chat box. So I've now done
brilliant.
that. Look at that. I'm happy for the unhappy. I'm sorry for the unhappy icon. Was it an unhappy icon? Oh, I didn't realize that. Doesn't matter to me. There we go. Thank you. That's okay. Silent voices of Tigray. Okay, cool. On that note, there, I'm going to press the close music. Katrina, it has been amazing and wonderful. Thank you for coming on.
It's been really lovely. Thank you so much for inviting me. And let's do that February thing about EHCPs.
Yeah, February, EHCPs, how to make people at county cry. Or like not
Yeah.
you. Cool. Thank you so much. I will press the close button now.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.
That's it.